Your
Well, it's
RoboCop.
either
Oh, you took it off. Your RoboCop henchman hat.
here. I gotta put it back.
Is it cold there?
It's so cold.
What's cold to you?
Um. Well, it's
Because cold.
it's not like the temperature. It's the like the wind. So so right now it's only 50, but that's not that cold. But it's so windy. So it's just like it just chops into you.
Yeah, I mean, I get that.
Although earlier today I was out. I went out on a walk, and it was colder than that. So how's it in Chicago?
Well, it's not as cold as it should be because the planet is dying, but it's it's all right. We're
Yeah.
starting to see sun for the first time in like 30 days.
Oh, that's nice.
Whitney said she'll be here soon. She's saying she's having browser incompatibilities.
Who isn't these days?
Yeah, right. I get it. So it's only 38 degrees.
Oh, see, that's not that bad. But
No,
if it's windy though,
it's not even that windy. It's actually kind of nice. It was -8 a couple of weeks ago, which is usually what it is around this time. Like post-apocalyptic. Like every time you leave the house, it's like an Arctic expedition.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's not been like that so much. It's been a lot of like hot and then very very cold and then kind of warm and then the issue is that the sun is gone. No sun.
We don't have that issue here.
Just the Father and the Holy Ghost. That's for you. That joke's for you.
Thank you.
You can take that one to the bank.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
deposit it. You can tell that one at church. Be like, hey, I heard they don't get the sun in Chicago.
I think that joke would kill at church.
Yeah. I wrote a joke yesterday. You want to hear it?
Sure.
What's better? What's better than Bette Midler? Bette
What?
Toppler. Bette Toppler. What's better than
Yeah,
Bette
yeah.
Midler?
Did you put that on? Or is that? Do you have Twitter?
Bette
Did you put
Toppler.
it on Twitter
No,
yet?
fuck Twitter. Twitter's gross. Twitter's terrible. I can't believe people are even still
I don't
on
know.
it.
I'm not
They're
on it.
terrible.
I just thought that that's where people post jokes instead of going to open mics now.
No, they just have podcasts. I saw
Mm.
this like right before you got on. I was on Reddit and it was like podcast is ruining stand-up comedy. And I was like, oh shit.
No, that's
That's
good. Ruin it. Take it down.
yeah,
Stand-up
it's
comedy is the
terrible.
worst. We should
It's
all just
terrible.
be home and tell your jokes to 5 people.
We need to
And
leave the people at bars alone.
yes,
They need to just sit at a bar and be themselves. They don't need.
although don't you think that maybe stand-up comedy like gorilla mics where you're interrupting someone's day at a bar or night at a bar, maybe that is someone's wake-up call to go, I shouldn't be out at 9 p.m. at a bar. I should be at home with my family. What am I doing? These people are telling jokes about their horrible lives. I don't need to be around this. I need to go fix some things.
So you're saying like stand-up comedy is doing their civic duty by making bars less fun by having their presence there. So people are like, this isn't like Cheers at all. This is annoying.
I appreciate that you said it like that. Yeah, stand-up comedy makes bars less fun. And that is I think that will drive people back to just drinking mineral water away from bars.
I think you're right. I mean, nothing I definitely remember starting a show and having people just get their food right when the mic starts up and we're like, all right, all right, all right. Let's do some stand-up comedy. And they're like, son of a bitch. I can't even enjoy this. This is my one time to eat a burger out. I budgeted for this. This is my cheat day, and I just got it. I got my steak fries, and now I have to listen to open mic stand-up comedy. Where back then, I don't know. I mean, now I feel like jokes are nicer, But back then it was just like 10 guys talking about masturbation in different ways.
Mm. And all of them have to talk to the guy who's trying to eat because he's the only audience member.
Oh yeah, and he's the only one that's not there to do stand-up comedy, and he's also like he happens to be sitting right next to the stage, and he's just like, "I just wanna have my beer. I've had a hard day at work. I've had 4 people die on the table for me today, you know? And now I gotta
Yeah.
listen to you guys dying on stage, and, it's just terrible."
Uh,
Same goes for trivia. Trivia is the worst.
the only time I've ever done trivia is when I've walked into a bar blackout and I've done trivia. But I was on my way to something else, and that was the only reason. Or, oh, hello.
Hey. Oh. We can't hear you. We got a connection issue. They're very pixelated as well.
Is that better?
Oh, there we go. Now we're
Can hear
cooking
you,
with
yeah.
gas.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yeah, one sec. So now it's saying having issues communicating with our servers. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can
sounds
hear you.
nice.
Can you hear us?
I'm just really pixelated.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you almost say hella
Okay.
pixelated?
Is you guys don't? Yes, I said I'm hella pixelated. So I don't know if that will like catch up, or if since the audio is okay and you guys don't use video, this is okay.
Yeah, it's probably
What do you
fine.
think?
Yeah. I mean, we probably won't use the video if it's bad, but it could also be better later. When like it could just be the display is bad or something like that.
Okay. Would leaving and coming back do anything?
Maybe. Let's
If
try
you
it.
want to
I've
try
never
it,
used this
sure.
before, so
Yeah.
okay. I'll be right back.
So anyway, trivia. Walk
It's
into
the
a
worst.
bar, blackout drunk, and I've only done this a couple times, but that is the only time I've ever done trivia at a bar. And I get so heated, and I'm either alone or with someone else who's also as drunk as I am. And I love trivia, but I mean, those are my only experiences of it, though.
Really?
You do
The only
kind of.
time I've played trivia. What?
Well, I was just gonna say you do kind of watch the host like die a little bit when you get like when you're clearly not there for the trivia.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean everyone there that's not there for trivia is dying a little bit. Even the people who are there for trivia, there's like,
They
this is
they are
fun.
dying. They're dying the most.
Just answering questions. Hey, we were talking about how stand-up comedy it does its civic duty by making bars terrible.
Yes, in all the ways. Trivia, mics, shows. Agreed.
Hmm. Yeah, especially when you just sit down, you get your food, and then someone's like, all right, who wants to hear some stand-up comedy?
The only
I
time
feel like since I've
that's been successful. Oh, what?
No, go ahead.
I didn't want to cut you off. What were you gonna say? Oh, I was just Jody. Maybe you remember this, but like at Limerick, there was this one time where I got on the mic and it was like election night, and I said, all right, who's ready for stand-up comedy?" And the one guy at the bar stood up and said, "No, not
Yeah,
tonight.
well,
We're not doing
yeah,
it tonight."
I
And
distinctly remember that because Trump had just won.
Oof.
well, Trump
And
had he was about to win.
yeah, and everyone was very upset.
We were all very
And then we
upset.
were like, hey, well, who wants to do my stand-up open mic? And
Oh man.
no, we should have just canceled that show.
I think we
We
should
did
have. I
do
didn't even think about it until we were there.
Devastating.
It
Yeah,
was good that he said no. He objected to it.
I don't think I did mics for like a week at that time. I was just
He
like,
didn't
I'm
just
just gonna avoid it.
that was a good idea. We did that night. We did like all stand in a line, and I think we did that minute. What was it called? The minute flash, the hot flash minute. where everyone got a
Yeah.
minute to do a joke
Mhm.
at the end of the show. Yeah.
Oh,
Tom, it was
lightning
your
round.
show. Lightning round, yeah.
Yeah, because I felt so
We did
bad that everybody had been there for like 4 hours and not doing stand up. We were all just so miserable watching Trump win.
Mm.
So I thought,
yeah.
well, let's just do some time and get out of here.
We did do a lightning round, and everyone did have a nice kind of hot bit
Mhm.
of what just happened. And that kind of lifted our spirits up by like 3%
Mm.
It was
for a
cathartic.
brief moment. It was mildly cathartic. And then after that, it was just 4 years of depression.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Speaking of depression.
Well,
hey Whitney,
welcome
welcome
to
welcome to
Functioning.
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 Examples of functioning. Navigational sensors aren't functioning. Glad to see you still fully functioning.
I'm Jody, and this is Tom.
Hi.
And we're sitting here with Whitney Wasson.
Yeah, nailed it.
Wasson.
Wasson.
The creator of Sober Rabbit,
Mhm.
which is an amazing comic that I've been diving into the last couple of weeks.
Hi. Hello.
Welcome. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Of course.
So tell us about yourself a little bit. Give us just the basics, and we can get right into it.
Okay, sounds great. Y'all are talking about the Trump election, and I got sober right before that. So I picked maybe the worst time in American history to be like, let's not be a recovering alcoholic and addict anymore. So yeah, I got sober in August 2016. And then that whole mess happened, and I got an office job, a big kid office job in like October of 2016. And it was the first time in Chicago that I had a, grown up job, like nice salary, front desk. I felt like an adult for once. And so I quickly became miserable given that I was working in a real estate office right after, this contentious election. And I had always drawn comics and, little kind of like journal doodles. And I hadn't really ever committed to a long term project or anything, but I was doodling basically at my job and then to and from on my commute. And a friend really liked my comics, which were all kind of about how angry I was to be sober and how much I resented all the 12-step groups that I was going to. Because, I feel like y'all can understand that the stand-up comedy world and the why don't you be healthy and make mild choices and moderate like world of 12-step stuff, like those two things clash so hard. So I had been drawing these doodles of this really drunk rabbit, and I was just sort of like putting my feelings into the rabbit. And my friend Madeline was like, you could post that online, like you could keep doing these. And I was like, well, maybe I could. But eventually, and some time passed, I didn't really do anything with it. But I was hit by a car as a pedestrian on the way to a gig in 2019, and suddenly this very mobile, busy, hectic stand-up schedule I had came to a halt. Like I got laid off, the pandemic hit. And so I went from this sort of like go, go, go lifestyle to like, I literally can't get off the couch. I have to sit here and heal. And so I was like, well, what if I did post these comics I've been doodling? And that's how Sober Rabbit was born. I sort of wanted to talk about, instead of the cool, transformative power of recovery, it was like, well, actually, you kind of just have to like be quiet and like do your little mindfulness and, all these things that kind of, from my perspective anyway, aren't really shown much in movies or books. They don't really show the monotony of it. And so that's in the early days what I was trying to do with Sober Rabbit. Like, let's show what recovery is actually like, which is boring and grueling. And then eventually it's nice and things are good. But at the time, I really was channeling like angry, feelings. And then, once the pandemic really caused us to lock down, I was like, well, I should professionalize. So I started an LLC. I started releasing print comics instead of just the web comic, and it sort of spun out from there. I'm really touched to have like a following of people that are in recovery internationally, and people that are like, oh, well, I'm in recovery and I haven't really read comics that much before. So that's kind of part of my audience too, hooking in people with comics. So, yeah.
That's great. That's really, I mean, I think that's one of the things that really drew us to having you on the podcast was that it seemed like there was a similar story, because the podcast sort of started that way as well, where it was, we wanted to talk about the other side of alcoholism and recovery and kind of approach it from a more comedic stance, because sometimes it's just like, it just
Yeah.
sucks. And it's not like, clapping and going to
Yeah.
meetings. It's just like sitting and being like, what do I
Yeah.
do? And, having to like, there's also that like you're doing the mindfulness exercises and then you're just like, there's a lot of loneliness in that
Yes.
and a lot of sitting in that
Mm-hmm.
discomfort. Uh, and so we kind of wanted to bring that in on our own little journey and, see who else out there needs to hear that,
Yeah, I love that.
which it seems like there's a lot, especially with this whole new sober movement going on. Yeah.
Well, and I was just
Yeah.
talking to.
I really like Sober
Oh,
Rabbit. I
thank
was
you.
getting into it.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm hoping
You're
to
welcome.
be able to move the comic from Instagram to my website so that the readability is easier, because right now you have to kind of scroll all the way down on Instagram, and it doesn't have like any or hardly any accessibility options. Like I didn't do alt text from the beginning, and so it's many years worth of catching up that I have to do. But yeah, it's sort of related to what you're talking about, loneliness and just like, I don't know, a little bit of outreach, I guess. I was talking to a friend yesterday about how, it's been rough times, like personally for me, but also just, regionally, nationally, internationally. Like, I just feel like there's so many terrible things going on right now. And I've had a lot of like grief and loss and injury and all this stuff. But I was telling a friend that my biggest fear when I first got sober is that I would lose all my friends, and I wouldn't have community. And kind of
Mhm.
in a way that happened, but it was that I was losing people that weren't actually friends. And especially in the comedy world, like it wasn't that
Mhm.
we were friends, it was that we were going to the same bar on the same day for like 10 years. And so when I removed myself from, a lot of those situations, and I still did stand up, and I did up until, I mean, I did a show a couple months ago, but I'm not anymore like a working comedian. I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to lose everybody. And now it's like, no, I have quality friends. I have people that like can listen to me and be my friend instead of just, the very social, shallow, tenuous, like comedy and art world friendships.
How long did you do comedy?
I started in 2013, and then when I got injured
Oh,
was 2019.
that's when I started.
Really?
Oh,
That's
wow.
so funny. And
Yeah.
were y'all both in the Atlanta scene? Is that what I heard / read?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's a fun scene.
Yeah, yeah, we both started in the Atlanta scene. Yeah, it was cool. You're also a Southerner, right?
I
Aren't you from,
am.
I think, Missouri?
Well, the border. I
Okay.
started. I'm from Fort Smith, which is the which is the border of Arkansas and Oklahoma, and then I spent a lot of time in Fayetteville, in Northwest Arkansas, which is more the Ozarks, and then that's where I started stand up. So I sort of went Fayetteville, Memphis, Chicago, as far as scenes go. But yeah, a lot of Atlanta people came
Oh,
through
cool.
Memphis when I was living there, and same with Fayetteville. I love Southern scenes. So
Yeah, it's where all the weirdos go.
no,
And that's
absolutely.
also the only place where you have to like I think it's the only like, I did a little comedy here in
Hmm.
Chicago and I honestly didn't really enjoy it. But I mean, Tom and I have done shows in Atlanta where it's just like a lot of like, urban
Hmm.
transplants. And then we also did a show where our cell phones, we didn't have cell service. So we just had to look for the big cow in the parking lot. And when it was comedy time, they just covered the billiards tables with like plywood and then turned them into regular tables. And then
Love
everyone just stood
it.
around while we like while we like did comedy in front of like a backdrop of a brick wall that was on a
Yes.
stage that like basically like looked like they had just uninstalled the chicken wire. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So there's
Yes.
always there's
Yes.
always like a little bit of that kind of old school grit there.
Yeah. I love that. I love have y'all read Levon Helm's book? I forgot what it's called.
No.
Levon from the band. He lived in Fayetteville for a long time. But he had all these crazy gigs of opening for Ronnie Hawkins. Because they started as like an opening band for this like rowdy guy and then like toured all over the place. But they would play all these bars that really had the chicken wire cage for the band, and they would play through just like do your time. They would play their 20-minute set for $150 or whatever, not unlike stand up, while beer was just being pelted at that cage. And I always kind of wanted to do a show like that, like a more hardcore version of the whole tomato show fad that was going
Yeah.
on for a while.
I
Yeah.
feel
Well, ours is that a hardcore is it's almost like the opposite end of the spectrum with
Hmm.
stand up, where you just got to do
Yeah.
your time to
Yes.
nothing. You have to stand there and get no laughs for 30
Hmm.
minutes, and then you can get off stage if you
Well,
want
and
to
it's
get
hard to
paid.
explain to non-performers that like anger is better than nothing.
Yes.
Nothing
Yes.
is
yeah.
bone chilling. You're just like, I'm here rethinking my life. Surely I've done my time. And then you look at your like, watch and you're like, I have 27 more minutes to go. Like not 7 minutes. It's horrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I got injured, um I had to sit because I have a broken foot, like I still do. And it was the most, for me, grueling thing to be like, I'm venting through stand up, for so much of my time, especially like I moved to Chicago for stand up, obviously. And so suddenly to be like, cool, my husband's at work, nothing to do but sit here and process all these unprocessed feelings and things. And, so it's that part of recovery does suck, but at the same time, like you do process some of those things. And I know stand-up comedians who do therapy and 12-step groups and all of that, and they are processing it instead of that really like unfunny, ugly therapy on stage thing that people can do,
Yeah.
which I did too. I'm not saying that I didn't do that, but processing it and then getting through it is the fun part of recovery, and being like, cool, I can leave that part of myself behind, that like angry,
Mm.
unfunny, terrified person that I was. I don't have to be that anymore.
I think I'm still that terrified person. Um,
At my core I am, but I try not to
yeah.
be.
I think I'm very scared. I think it's interesting that you kept doing comedy and you kept following creative endeavors, because when I got sober, I felt like my brain was just mush. I mean, I think psychologically it was like
Yeah.
I had just depleted all my dopamine, but or I guess not psychologically, but physically it was.
Hmm.
And then it took me a very long time to even like make words again, and I still struggle. I quit doing stand up a year though before I got sober, and then
Mm.
I just was like really focused on my main passion, which was drinking. And I was like, man, this comedy thing is really getting in the way of
Yeah,
my
I know.
main
This is such an
passion.
impediment, this passion of mine. Well, I think I was motivated by fear though. Like I thought at the time, because I moved to Chicago in 2015 and I got sober a year later, which goes to show you how well it was going for me. But I think that I thought if I stopped doing stand up, all of this progress, and what does progress even mean? All of this
Yeah.
will go away if I don't do almost exactly the same thing. And now, I'm coming up on 8 years before too long. Now I look back and I'm just like, oh my God, like I could have chilled. I could have, like, I didn't have to hit it as hard as I was hitting it because, I am in all facets of things an addict. I'm 0 to 60. There's
Hmm.
no medium. It's always like as hard as I can go. And I did have to eventually really scale it back. And then, I think somebody else might joke that like me getting literally run over by a car on the way to a show, my husband's like, maybe, just maybe the universe might have been trying to communicate something to you. But I'm so,
Yeah.
extreme that a car had to run me over. I literally couldn't walk anymore. And I had to stop doing what I was doing. But the funny thing is, I had that injury in October. And in December of that year, I went back to Oklahoma to do a bar show, a casino show for the money. And I literally was wheeling myself in a knee cart in this casino to open for this like terrible celebrity. And I really had to just look at my life and be like, okay, is this what you want? Do you want to be literally crawling on stage for no money to do a clean set to people in Muskogee who hate you? You know what I mean? Like, that's technically that is showbiz, but is that a life that's worth leading? So I did
Yeah.
scale it back.
Mhm.
And then in the pandemic, my partner's immunocompromised. And so we truly locked down. And so it really was a terrible kind of like, okay, change your whole life, idiot. Like, are you really going to keep hitting it as hard as you are? And, doing all these things that were antithetical to recovery. And I think that a lot of people have that moment, whether it's like a separation from a partner or the loss of a job or something. Like, you can be sober and still be emotionally just so messed up. And so, like, for me, taking the drugs and the alcohol away made the emotional problems like more glaring and all the mental illness that I was dealing with. So, just to be clear, it wasn't like I got sober and then I was like, oh, everything's, better, which I think newly sober people hope for. But in reality, there's a long reconstruction period, like
I know it
takes a
sucks.
minute.
It really sucks
Hmm.
because you're like, oh, I quit drinking. I'm done.
Yeah, I'm fixed.
I can now. It's time for me to live that life. And then it's like, nope. Turns out there's a reason why you were drinking. And then you're like, ah, shit. Now you got to do all this
Well, that's
work
the hardest
and
part
not
is
get
it
drunk.
takes
Mhm.
forever to accept that this is going to take a while.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, even now.
yeah, yeah. I
Right.
mean, I hit 5 years in November, and I'm still sort of like finding myself still in that recovery phase
Yeah,
where I'm still in that like it still feels like my first year
yeah,
where I'm just like fuck
I know.
every day, and it's just like damn it, damn it, damn it, and then like you turn around and it's just like another detail
Hmm.
in my recovery where I'm just like fuck, I got to
Yes.
address this now, and I got to do my taxes, and I got to go to work, and I got to do all this
Hmm.
shit, and I got to go make new friends, and it's just it's very overwhelming.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it's a lot easier than just standing still in my drunk haze, and not doing anything, and
Yeah.
so I keep thinking about, I saw this tweet a long time ago that said, God is in the details and the devil is in the details. Shit's going down in the details.
God, I know. The
And
details are
that's what it feels
tough.
like. Yeah, it's always like every time you like learn a little bit more about myself, I'm like, oh, fuck. It's like fractals. Like you
Yeah.
keep going into the fractal, and then there's another fractal in there, and you're like, fuck. It looks just like the other one, but it's a little, it's like it keeps happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they call recovery a journey, but
Hmm.
there is no end goal. It's just a constant push.
Yeah.
Do you find, on that note, like, do you find having this, not maybe to call it character is the wrong word, but to have Sober Rabbit, you mentioned earlier, you were drawing Sober Rabbit
Hmm.
drunk before, and having this kind of way to project your own journey
Hmm.
out. Do you find like that is able to help you face the things that is, a little bit harder for people to face without something like that?
Hmm.
Like you said, like sitting in a room mindfully going, "Uh-oh,
Yeah.
there's a lot of stuff that I haven't taken care of and it's really
Yeah.
loud right now."
Yeah. Well, I do. Like,
Um
yeah, I
but
know I
yeah.
do big time. And I relate so much, Jody, to being like, oh, well, I conquered this one thing. And then it's almost like that breaks and there's another jigsaw puzzle that's missing like 12 pieces clearly. And you're like, oh, like your princess is in another castle, like
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
single time.
Yeah.
But, I have always just been a sensitive, artistic person. You know, like I feel like the
Mm.
King Missile song "Sensitive Artist" is like it's a joke, but it's also like, no, I am this delicate Sufjan Stevens flower of a person, and like I kind of hid that under this like, you know, plaid shirt, denim jacket, boots wearing, whiskey drinking, coke doing stand up persona, because the Southern persona of tough person is messy, I feel like, and aggressive. And then, you know, I came to the gentle Midwest where like all of that is, you know, a different flavor, but still kind of the same. And, you know, if recovery for me is some kind of journey, it unfortunately is the peeling back of the onion layers of like, well, what is this really? Like, what do I want really? And I feel like I've always coped through art. You know, I've always used art in some respect. I was a theater kid, which is where my drinking really first took off. And
Mhm.
then, you know, stand up and then art throughout. And so using like comics is really helpful because comics are kind of, in my opinion, like stand up as a low art form of like, okay, I'm going to stand on this rock and yell at people. Comics is sort of like, okay, I'm going to draw this little character that we all understand to be a person or an animal or whatever. And it's going to have a word bubble and it's going to say, ouch. And you know, I don't even have to have like words. I could just have a little scribbly, you know, Charles Schultz, Charlie Brown kind of like angry scribble. And regardless of language or visual literacy, people can look at that and be like, "Oh, that character is pissed." Like that character's having a bad time. And I think that that's why comics and stand up are so fun. They're so straightforward. Now that I've been drawing for a couple years now and, you know, putting out comics and trying to improve in my craft or whatever, I'm like, damn, that's really sophisticated. This is more sophisticated than I thought. You know, like you look at Nancy comics or Peanuts and everybody loves them and everybody can read them. And that's hard to do, like to do like a 4-panel comic or a 3-panel
Mhm.
comic. Yes, there's the 1 2 3 setup of stand up, but it's a lot harder than it looks. And so I guess all of that to say, like in my earliest sober rabbit comics, it would be like Rabbit is pissed off and he looks at the sun and the sun has the same face and is also pissed off. And like that's I got my point across, right? I'm having a bad day, but now, you know, I didn't intend initially for Rabbit to sort of be this cipher or alias or avatar for me, but I started dealing with more complex, ugly things in recovery. I write pretty openly about how my best friend ended their life in 2020. I had another huge death in my life. My cousin died as well, and she had substance problems, you know, and that might have contributed to what happened. But all of this to say, like, yes, I do like vent a lot through the comic, but it's also kind of fun to be like, well, what else could I inject in this that isn't exactly my life, but has something to do with me? Like, if Rabbit's main issues are depression and inappropriate outbursts and just kind of like not being an adult, you know, then Brenda's problems are disordered eating and relationship problems and emotional dishonesty. So I feel like I inject a little bit of myself in all of the characters, but none of them are me exactly, even though Rabbit is the closest, you know, and it helps me. Because then the other thing that's related to that, and I feel like I give this book to everybody. Linda Berry has this book called Making Comics. Um, and Linda Berry is just amazing. So anybody that likes recovery and had a tough childhood and likes comics, she's like my hero. She teaches in Wisconsin, but anyway, she has this great journaling system, and it's essentially like, draw your day, draw 4 things that happen from your day. Don't make it look good. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get it down on paper. So earlier in the pandemic, I did a lot of art journaling. And now I actually just ran across a notebook that I hadn't looked at since like 2020. And now it's so helpful to look back and be like, oh, okay, well, I did get over this problem that I was drawing about. Or this thing that I dismissed as not a problem is actually a huge problem. And so having that sort of like visual chart of how I was feeling is so helpful. So I tell my friends who don't even think that they can draw, like, you can draw a little figure and make him look sad, or you can draw, you know, your potted plant that's sitting in your office, just it's such for me it's so helpful to do something tactile, and that ties into therapy stuff, get this inner turmoil stuff out, whether that's a painting or clay or comics, or for other people it's a walk in the park or deadlifting, but for me
Yeah.
as a crippled person, sitting and drawing rabbits is pretty great.
Yeah, for me, it's
Well, it
jujitsu.
sounds like
Yeah.
oh,
See, that's a really physical thing, and that's also something that you
yeah.
have to practice as a craft and a skill, and
Mhm.
I'd love to be able to do that. I have a lot of wrestling friends, so.
Mm. Well, I was gonna say, Jody, you kind of addressed a different part of recovery, I think, but from like the artistic perspective or creative perspective, um, it really does help to build an interior world where you're able to kind of like with these
Mhm,
characters that you have, you can kind of Rolodex and go like, this is where I
mhm,
am, this is where I'm feeling. Not exactly like this
mhm,
isn't me, but this is aligning close to where I am, and you can kind of build a way for you to be just so aware of
mhm,
yourself, which in that kind of that first year or two or 5 years of
mhm,
recovery, 10 years of recovery, it's just so difficult to manage
mhm,
that or even kind of want to
mhm,
get to that emotional clarity. Whereas when you have something like an artistic outlet like this, it just comes with the territory. You don't even have to be very intentional
mhm.
about it. It just
Well, it's
comes.
it's helpful to I found, and I don't want to speak for everybody, but I found that journaling can be really helpful for what am I feeling, like like at a very base level, like for grief is so destabilizing. Like
Mhm.
everyone tells me very unhelpfully, grief isn't linear. Yeah, I know grief isn't linear, but can you tell me how I'm feeling in this given moment? Because I have no idea. Like, it makes no sense to go from grateful to furious to terrified back to content. Like, I'm just all over the place. And, something somebody said in a meeting a long time ago really helped me. They were like, they weren't all sunshine and roses. It was a pretty solemn, talk that they gave. And they said, yeah, the first 10 years for me was awful. And I had never heard anyone be so open and be like, yeah, this wasn't fun or chill at all. Like, this was ugly, unfortunate, shameful, difficult rebuilding. And again, I'm not trying to dwell in the negative, but I think an honest acknowledgement of feelings is what helps me in general. And a friend just had a really huge loss. And I told her, like, what I have wanted people to say when I've had all this grief. I've lost, home group friends. I've really, like, a lot of people have left in the past couple of years. And I would just like sometimes for someone to say, wow, that's horrible,
Yeah.
and just nothing else, and not like, and they'll be happier in heaven, or, and I'm praying for you, or have you tried yoga? All these things that, like,
Yeah.
they're nice platitudes. I understand why people say them, but sometimes just an acknowledgement of like, you look terrible. Do you feel terrible? Yes. Like, so I hate to have to be that demonstrative, but comics are that demonstrative. There's a little rain cloud, or a character is walking around bleeding, or Dr. Manhattan is sitting alone in space. You know what I mean? Like, it's clear. The imagery is clear, and life is not that way. Life is messy and confusing, and things change all the time. It's tough.
Especially when other people are met with that, like when you're going through something like grief or recovery,
Hmm.
and you're met with that, like you're met with someone who isn't experiencing that.
Hmm.
And instead of just being like, that sucks, they try to find something, you know, that
Hmm.
to help you, or something that's a little on the brighter side. And it's like, yeah, it does. Thank you. Yes. That's all
Hmm.
I need. I hear what you're saying. It's like, I just sit with them and be like, this fucking blows. And
Hmm.
it does. The end, period. You know what I mean? And you
Yeah.
just got to like wait it out or just experience it.
Yeah. And that's what I get from people who have a lot of recovery time, whether their issue was drug addiction, food addiction, whatever the poison was, like, I found that people that have a lot of time in genuinely doing the work of, like, going to therapy, going to meetings, going to rehab, whatever it is that they need to do, it's kind of hard to phase them because they've done the ugly stuff, you know, they've done it and they've sat with their feelings and they're pretty unshakable or unflappable. And that's, I hope one day that I'm a little less, you know, 1,000% feelings every second. But people tell me that it comes with time. So, you know, we'll see, I guess.
I mean, the best thing I think you could do is just like, have you heard this sad song?
Yeah,
Are you
exactly.
feeling sad? Here's a whole here's my sad playlist. You're like, oh,
Oh,
perfect.
I
And then I
love
could
that.
really get into it.
I love the recent notion of the sad playlist. I know that that's not a new thing, but like the idea of sharing them with people, since it's
Yeah,
so much easier. You don't have to mix them a tape and hand it to them. You can just like link it to them. That's so cathartic.
it is. You're like, this one's gonna make you cry.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, give it to me. I love it.
Yes. Yes. Like, okay, this is for anyone who doesn't have a go-to sad song. Roy Orbison's Leah. I'm gonna leave it out there. Crank that bad boy, have a cry. Yeah, it's the saddest. It's like the saddest song, other than maybe my dad used to always sing. He stopped loving her today. I can't remember.
Oof. Yeah.
Oh
Whew,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
a downer. My friends, I have some friends that put on movies to cry, and I think that that's a very healthy thing too. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm gonna spend this 90 minutes crying, and then I can go on with my day. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I watched on
yeah.
Monday, I was feeling kind of low.
Hmm.
And so I watched All's Quiet on the Western Front.
Oof.
Got me. I don't know why. I mean, I know why it got me. I don't know
Hmm.
why I watched it. I'd never seen it before.
You're like, what I need is some trench warfare. Like, I
Yeah,
really just need this.
I really need like a wake up call at the horrors of industrial warfare. And then, but even before that, like a couple of days before that, I watched Fried Green Tomatoes.
Oh my god. Oh, the best.
Oh, yeah, and I was just bawling. And then before that, I watched Steel Magnolias. I was really on like a
You were
southern.
really kind of going through
I was
it.
Wow,
really,
we're feeling it. Yeah.
but it
Huh.
was great. I mean, it was like at the end of it, I was like, boy, I can feel Sally Field is doing the crying
Oh,
for me. And I'm like sitting there crying with her. And then,
mhm.
the next day I was feeling great. I felt fine. And
Yeah.
I just needed it. It's better than trying to watch like, some like old comedy or something. Like
Yeah,
I
no,
was
no,
just
no.
like, I
Drink the
need this.
juice, Shelby. Oh,
Yeah. Ugh, I'm gonna start crying now.
God. I'm just like dying at this horrible stuff. Yeah. I love that though. I love all that. Like, I think that, you know, for me, addiction was bury the feelings. And so, whatever thing unburies them for you, do it, you know? Like, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Especially when it's like especially in my recovery, there's just these moments where it's this very visceral, uncontrollable need
Hmm.
to emote. And then I'm like, and then once it happens, I'm like, why did that happen?
Hmm.
And then you find like, it's like the never ending story where you find your enemy. Like you can name your enemy. You know how like Sebastian has to name the enemy for
Hmm.
Atreyu to kill it. And, man, talk about sad when that dog or a dog, when that horse, he just gives up. uh, moving on.
Well, I mean, you just kind of cited the best metaphor for mental illness and getting lost in
Yeah,
the darkness. Like,
yeah.
nothing clear, really. So, perfect.
But it gives you an opportunity to examine those emotions, which I'm sure comes out in your comics and in your art, and you're just like, oh, and now I know what I need to write. Now I
Hmm.
know what I need to draw.
Hmm.
Once you sort through it.
Yeah.
You mentioned Brenda.
Hmm.
Is that the pigeon?
Yes.
Okay, I read the long one about the tulips,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved it.
Oh, thank you. I'm actually going to be picking that comic up. It's still going, but I'm going to be picking that up more in one of my projects in the next couple of years. I don't want to say I can get it done this year or next. Is a Brenda origin story called The Book of Brenda, and it's going to
Ooh,
collect. It's going to collect that story, which I think right now is at like 35 or 40 pages, and that has like a lot more to go. And then also do a bit of, you know, her origin story, drinking wise and food wise, and all of that. But yeah, Brenda was kind of a one-off gag that suddenly became the favorite character in the comic, because I thought darkly it would be really funny to have a Chicago City pigeon with an eating disorder, because everybody's always feeding pigeons,
Yeah.
but they're also beautiful, resilient, interesting characters who are like, or characters, animals that are like loyal, and they're not the smartest sometimes, but yeah, I love being in the loop and looking at all those raggedy pigeons. They're the best.
I like when a dove ends up kind of joining their group, like some
Yeah.
lost pet dove, and then so you
Hmm.
see this like beautiful dove with all these kind of street birds, I guess
Yeah.
you could call them.
Yeah. And then they breed and they have some really beautiful, ratty pigeons downtown.
Yeah.
Like, my friend pointed out, and now I can't help but see it. And again, I'm sorry. Like, I just feel like, full disclosure, I'm a bummer. That sometimes pigeons will lose toes in the cold. And
Yeah.
so you'll see pigeons in the loop that only have like one or two little toes, but they're still just like hopping around, eating trash, doing their thing. I relate to that.
Just surviving. Does Brenda has all her toes, or does she?
Yes, she does for now, but her partner,
Okay.
Lucky, is a rat that is an amputee. And so not everybody in Sober Rabbit
Oh.
has all of their digits.
Oh. Interesting.
Mhm.
I definitely want to dive deeper into the Sober Rabbit world and the
the
lore.
the expanded universe, as people say.
Yeah. Yeah. The rabbit verse.
Yes, the rabbit verse. Thank you.
um Tom, did you have any other questions for Whitney here? I was looking through our conversation.
Um. Well, nothing natural. I was just thinking that you did. I don't know. Nothing. No question. I just really like how you phrased how you just were talking about kind of peeling the onion with the creative process, just because it's super like Jungian to me. So I appreciate that, like doing kind of character work and like character driven narrative and helping to work through stuff, because that was my first year of sobriety. I wrote a comic book,
Oh yeah.
and that was what helped me to
Coyote
like
something.
walk away from stand up and do something creative.
That's awesome.
What,
You got
Jody?
to send
Coyote.
it to me.
Oh man, yeah, I'll dig it up and send you the, because it really it was funny. Like, I don't know, maybe you had like a similar process, but I remember writing like an
Mhm.
addict at the time, because there were days where I would write for 12 hours
Mhm.
straight, just because I had
Yeah,
to
get it
like,
out.
just that
Mhm.
focus. You had to get it out. But then also the thing that I, and Jody can maybe attest to this if you remember, but like a lot of my first drafts were basically, it wasn't even word vomit. It was just like me clearly losing my mind and just coming so unhinged. And just like all of the script details were down to the most minute things, just because I was so hyper focused on every single
Mhm.
thing. Um, and being able to write my way out of that was a blessing, but it really was like a 2 to 3 year process of, okay, I guess I'm going to be unhinged every second of every day.
Yeah.
Um, and if I don't write it out, then I'm going to get lost in my mind.
But
Yeah,
I
I
think
remember you
that's what it
sending me first
takes.
drafts.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you say,
I just
Jody?
remember you sending me first drafts, and me being like, I'm
Oh yeah.
not going to read all that, Tom. You got to cut this down.
Congrats, or sorry this happened to you, but I ain't reading all that.
Yeah. This is like 46 pages, man.
Early sobriety, baby.
Oh yeah, like there was like a 20-page comic book that I wrote, but like the script is like 80 pages
Yeah.
long. So it's just like this person needs to work through this in therapy, not do this to his friends.
I relate so deeply.
What was it called?
Well, and that was what was so interesting when you brought that up before, because I didn't know that you had written Drunk Rabbit, which I just, the idea of Rabbit getting sober from a place of being kind of where we've all been, that's the evolution of a character like that, and kind of catharsis through that is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think tunneling through it is just, if somebody has found a way to not do that, congrats. But like for me, I kind of have to hit every branch of the tree falling down, and learning something, and my art is the same way, of just like gotta be trial and error. So I look at those early comics and I'm kind of embarrassed, because they're stick figures that I was drawing on my phone with my finger. So they're not the best looking, but they're super easy to read, I think, because it's like, oh, this character is sad, this character is envious, or whatever it is. And so anybody, like, people are just like, I've always wanted to draw comics, but I've never, I didn't take art classes. And I'm like, even better, your images are going to be so much clearer, because you're not worrying about it looking good, like, just go for it.
Yeah. I think honestly, I think that's a good message to end the podcast on. To just go for it.
Yeah.
Write your comic, dive into your art, do whatever it is that gives you a place to examine your recovery.
Yeah. And feelings are terrifying, but you'll get through it. You've gotten through it so far. So same with art. Start with a stick figure and go from there,
And put it out there. People will read it. I mean, I'm not going to read Tom's script, but he gave it to me. He gave
Maybe
it to
if
me.
you whittle it down to 20 instead of 80 pages.
So send it to someone. They might not read all of it, but I got to like page 10.
There you go.
That's pretty good. 1/8 through. That's pretty good.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you for being on the podcast, Whitney. Yeah, everyone check out Sober Rabbit on Instagram and Patreon. And you said you had a website, right?
I do. It's easy. Soberrabbit.com. That has all the
Easy
links to
peasy.
everything.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. And we'll see you guys later. Bye.